Abhay Vaidya, Director, Pune International Center. We are delighted to have Professor Suhas Palshikar, one of India's foremost political scientists, who will be speaking to us on the political implications of elections 2024. I also wish to welcome senior journalist Shri Mukund Sangoram, former resident editor of Lok Satta Pune, as the chair for today's event. These were truly memorable elections held in 7 phases from 19th April to 1st June. The results were out on 4th June, and such was the impact that the reverberations from these results will be felt for a long time. I recall a conversation with our Vice President, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, in early April. With all his networking and varied sources of information, he was expecting the opposition to do better. When the exit polls came, fortunately, I did not waste a single minute on mainstream television or newspapers. My time was spent on YouTube, listening to Yogendra Yadav, Prashant Kishore, and of course, you, Professor Palshikar. When the results came, it was enjoyable to watch Pranay Roy on decoder. The election results were dramatic, and they took me back to an interview that I had with the late former leader Sharad Joshi some 30 years ago. Everyone was fed up of coalition politics then, but Sharad Joshi held that for a diverse nation like India, coalition governments are extremely important because of the inbuilt checks and balances. Professor Suhas Palshikar, our distinguished speaker today, has taught political science for 4 decades, from 1978 to 2016. He is honorary co-director of Lok Niti, a research program on comparative democracy at CSDS, the Center for Study of Developing Societies, New Delhi. He is the chief editor of Studies in Indian Politics, Lok Niti's biannual journal brought out by SAGE. Professor Palshikar has been associated with the National Election Study since the 1996 elections. He writes regularly in English and Marathi on contemporary politics, and we are all familiar with his interviews on TV and OTT. His latest books include The Last Fortress of Congress Dominance, Maharashtra since the 1990s, Politics and Society Between Elections, and research papers such as The Expanding Role of Majoritarianism in India. Our chair today, Shri Mukund Sangoram, former deputy editor and resident editor of Lok Satta Pune, has had a distinguished career of more than 4 decades. He has written extensively on politics and civic issues. Music and culture are subjects he is deeply interested in. Shri Sangoram is a recipient of many awards and is well known in Maharashtra. Friends, to give you an idea about Pune International Center, very briefly, this is a public policy research think tank, now in its 13th year. PIC is led by Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar and Dr. Vijay Kelkar, and we work in 5 areas: national security, energy, environment and climate change, social innovation, governance and urbanization, and science, technology, and the national innovation ecosystem. PIC conducts a number of conversations, discussions, book launches, conferences, and roundtables throughout the year. And almost all of these events are free and open to the public. You are welcome to attend our events. Today's discussion will have a Q&A session, and you are welcome to ask your questions to the speakers. I shall now hand over the floor to Professor Palshikar. Sir, over to you.
Chairperson of today's session, Shri Mukund Sangoram, Shri Abhay Vaidya, other friends from the PIC, and friends. It's indeed a great pleasure to be amongst you and at an event hosted by the PIC. If I am not mistaken, it was also in 2019 when a similar event was organized by the PIC and I was asked to speak. Probably that time the theme that I could have in my mind was, could the results have been a little worse or better? This time around, the question probably would be the same, could the results have been better or worse? But I will not dwell on that much. Instead, what I plan to do in next 40-45 minutes is to mainly ask a question, what happens to BJP's dominance now after the results? The results are with us. Most of us know what the results have been. Many of you would also know the more detailed nuances of the result and so on and so forth. So rather than going into that, I would address this question. What happens to BJP's dominance now? What it means, for example, for the shape of democratic politics in the future in this country, and by future I mean mostly the immediate future, next 5 years, 10 years or so. To understand that question, I would look at the election outcomes briefly at the beginning and then turn to this larger question about what happens to BJP's dominance. Those who follow political science or those who follow Indian politics would know that this term, dominant party system, has been very commonly used in the Indian context for its politics of the earlier period till, let's say, 1970s or so. Then, as the dominant party collapsed, that term also went into retirement, and instead of that, analysis of coalition politics started taking place. So I would revisit that idea of dominant party system and ask the question whether BJP still qualifies for the label of a dominant party, and if so, what are its implications? To begin with then, compared to the last two elections, everyone now would agree, apart from the fact that many of us might feel relieved, many of us might feel pissed off by the results, we would agree that this election was much more normal than the last two elections. In fact, many commentators and analysts have already said this, that this was going to be a normal election, and it finally proved to be a normal election. A normal election then means that things like normal politics, party factionalism, rivalries, local issues, state level politics, all these factors sort of re-emerge in politics and they shape the outcome rather than any wave or a common icon or a symbol shaping the election outcome. 2014 was by any standards a critical election as far as Indian politics are concerned. India has had two critical elections earlier, 1967 and 1989. 2014 was such a critical election in the sense that it not only reconfigured politics, it also started off a new process of social realignments, new forces coming and supporting a party, and the entire political discourse of the country shifting away from what it was pre-2014. In that sense, it was a critical election. 2019 happened in the shadow of that critical election, which often happens, like it happened in the 90s, that in the shadow of 1989, many things happened subsequently. Also, 2019 was shaped by the oversized Modi phenomenon, the extraordinary expectations that the electorate had from Mr. Narendra Modi, and then there was also the immediate context of a strong nationalist sentiment manufactured mainly by the Pulwama developments. So all these constituted the backdrop for 2019, and it shaped almost as if it were a replay of a critical election of 2014. As we turn to 2024, however, we find that the BJP was fighting for the third term, which is in any case very difficult in a representative or liberal democratic setup for any government. But we must also remember that BJP was not manifestly unpopular. After the results, there may be some retrospective understanding of what the people thought, etc. But let us face the fact that there was no manifest unpopularity of the BJP at that point of time, nor was Modi's popularity really very weak. It had plateaued, no doubt. It was not any more increasing. That kind of excitement which Modi could create in 2014 and 2019 may have been absent in 2024. Yet, by any standards, he continued to be the towering popular leader of the BJP at that time. And as I said, therefore, the results seem to be somewhat dramatic. If you look at the results, you will find that actually not much has happened in these elections in terms of the electorate moving from one party to another. It's almost where we were earlier, 2019. So if 2014 and 2019 accrued certain votes to the BJP was more or less successful in retaining that voter base. And if 2014 and 19 had pushed the Congress out of the competitive arena, that also continued despite, in terms of seats, a much better performance by the Congress. In stark statistical terms, numbers terms, for example, the BJP lost barely 1% votes in these elections. Please remember, when we talk of these elections as being something very extraordinary, that the BJP actually did not lose votes. It lost barely 1% votes. The Congress added just about a little less than, in fact, 2% votes to what it had in 2019. So nothing great there either. In terms of number of parties contesting the elections and sharing the remaining votes among themselves, the same continued this time also, because these two parties, supposedly all India parties, if they get something like 57% votes, it goes without saying that remaining 43 go to the rest of the parties. That scenario also then remained the same this time. There is one more thing to BJP's victory, and let us look at this slide, just a few slides, not many really. If you look at this slide, you will find the victory margins of the BJP, and they are quite decent. In fact, 62% of BJP seats were won with a victory margin of 1 lakh votes and above. That is quite creditable. If you calculate the BJP seats won with a margin of less than 50,000, because in a parliamentary election, given the size and competition of our electorates, a margin of 50,000 could be dangerous for the winning party, for the winning candidate. So if you calculate that, this time around, 18% of BJP seats are won with a margin of less than 50,000. But last time, there were only 13% seats which BJP lost with this margin, less than 50,000. Whereas last time, BJP had won practically 3 out of every 4 seats, 74% seats, with a margin of more than 1 lakh votes. So, one could probably argue that the magnitude of the victory that appeared in 2019 has been cut to size. And cut to size is probably the best explanation, description of this outcome. If you haven't seen, you should see therefore the cover page cartoon by Satish Acharya on the latest Frontline, because that tells you what is cutting to size means. So it is not that something dramatic has happened and people have rejected Modi and the BJP, but Mr. Modi and BJP tried to project themselves as so extraordinary, so invincible, that a small slip, a small fall looks like a downfall. So that's the parameter, if you are comparing it with that. Let us look at the direct contests, the second slide, between the Congress and the BJP. Because after all, these are all India parties, and you will find that in their direct contests, the BJP still wins 68% seats, 154 out of 224, where these two parties were head-on against each other. In other words, therefore, for the Congress to emerge as an important alternative or competitor to the BJP, there is some long distance to travel yet. Then what happened this time? With a loss of 1% or less than 1% of votes, BJP loses 60 plus seats. That is something interesting which has happened this time around. If you are a BJP supporter, you may be tempted now to complain that, oh, these are vagaries of the FPTP, first past the post system. This system is wrong, we must change it, and there must be proportionality or some other thing. The BJP and many other anti-Congress people have historically argued this. So let us look at the next slide. Look at the graph at your left. That is BJP's graph. I will try to explain it in a minute, and then you can again look at the graph perhaps. This is not a graph of the seats won by the BJP or lost by the BJP, but what has been the proportionality of votes and seats. For every 1% votes polled by the BJP, how many seats could it add? In 2014, it added for every 1% vote, 1.7% seats of the Lok Sabha. So that's the multiplier that converts votes into seats for the BJP in 2014. Of course, I have this earlier figure also for comparison if you want. So you can see how the BJP rose from barely something like 1.2 to 1.7. Then look at 1.5, and then it is 1.7, and this time around the BJP has been cut to size with that vote to seat conversion coming to 1.2. That means for every 1% votes, the BJP adds 1.2% seats. Fairly proportional, nothing to complain there much, nothing to also be very elated about it. That is what happens when you are an ordinary party in a normal election. You are slightly popular than the other party, so you get a little more votes. But what happens is that last time you had got extra votes and extra seats in disproportionate to those votes. Therefore, your fall becomes steep this time around. 60 seats lost. Look at the Congress for a minute, though that is not my main point right now. How the Congress has a zigzag kind of vote to seat conversion ratio. Congress starts very handsomely way back in 2004, and then you will 2009, and then starts falling, and then starts slightly picking up. So today, for example, in 2024, the conversion ratio for the Congress is barely under 1.8. That means Congress still is unable to convert its votes into seats in a robust or advantageous manner. This is the distinction between these two parties. But the main point, coming back to the argument, is that for the BJP, this was a moment of, in a sense, reckoning after 10 years, that in a normal competition, you lose not just because people are angry with you, but you lose also because people are disappointed with you. So you don't need anger. You don't need a lot of radical mobilization of the electorate to lose seats and practically lose an election. Because if the BJP had lost another 10-20 seats, we couldn't have NDA 3, as they are now called. Forget about Modi 3, you couldn't have even NDA 3 if the BJP had lost another 10-20 seats. And that takes me to the political geography of this election. Just a minute to spend on this, though all of you know this, it is good to look at it, how it happens. That there are some stable BJP states, okay, if there is a way you can switch off this light, but there is hardly one more slide left now. Good, yeah. You know, there are some states which are consistently with the BJP, and that connects to our later discussion about the dominance of the BJP. These states, which I have called as stable BJP states, would include some states from north central, and then some from east, Assam and Tripura, Arunachal included. Notably excluded from the list of stable BJP states is any state down the Vindhyas as a stable BJP state. Though Karnataka is a state where the BJP has made inroads historically, it still this time ditched the BJP considerably. Then there are BJP gain states. That is more extraordinary, that the BJP in this loss is also gaining. While it loses seats and also loses vote share in many states, it gains, and these are disparate states. They are not concentrated in any one part of the country. It gains only one seat in Kerala, but gains handsomely in terms of vote shares. It gains seats and votes in Telangana, both in the south. Its third southern state is Andhra Pradesh, where it doesn't gain much in seats, even in votes, but that's mainly because of its alliance with the TDP. Suddenly then it sort of enters finally in the eastern state of Odisha, and thus you have the spread of the BJP even as the BJP is losing seats in some of its traditional states, etc. What would worry the BJP is these two latter categories. One is the BJP setback states, where the BJP would have expected to do well, but didn't do well. They would include Haryana and Maharashtra. In a sense, both the states were annexed by the BJP in 2014. They are not traditional BJP states, but they were annexed by the BJP in 2014, and after 10 years, they faced losses in both these states. More than Maharashtra and Haryana, BJP's historical performance in Karnataka has been much better, and they sort of lost seats and vote share in Karnataka this time around. What would rankle the BJP, however, as all of you can imagine, is their losses in Uttar Pradesh. And there again I would argue that nothing dramatic has happened. If one looks at Uttar Pradesh politics of the 90s, that is where the BJP is back. The BJP gained seats and electoral support in Uttar Pradesh in 1990s, mid-90s. 96, 98, 99, BJP did well in Uttar Pradesh. That level of support has been still retained by the BJP. The extra weight has been shed. That is what has happened in these elections, partly because of the electoral arithmetic between the Congress and the Samajwadi Party, but also partly because of, and I must say something about it, so I will say it at this point of time, non-performance. Because in a sense, though I am not touching upon that subject this evening, the question would always remain, even for this 1% drop and loss of seats, what went wrong? I partly answered that question already by saying that state specifics emerged. I partly answered that question by saying that Modi's popularity was not enough this time. Though he remains popular, he doesn't seem to be now anymore a leader who can win elections easily and single-handed. But the third thing that our surveys have shown consistently, we did a survey before the elections and we did another one after the elections in every area, after every phase, immediately after the elections. What seems is that people were worried about economic distress. And clearly, without saying so, this reflects in the outcome of the elections. So a party which has been in power for 10 years finally has to show something as its contribution to the well-being of the citizens, which the BJP failed to do. That was evident in the campaign also. All of us know that in the campaign, the BJP never emphasized its contributions to governance. There was no discussion of, what's that? Minimum government, maximum governance thing. There was no mention of that. There was no mention of this dirty word Labharthis. That's one of the dirty words contributed by our politics to the lexicon of Indian democracy. We should be ashamed of the word Labharthi, because Labharthi means that there is a patron-client relationship between the ruler and the citizen. And therefore, but the BJP actually prided itself, Ujjwala and other things in 2019, which this time around they didn't. In other words, therefore, this drop in UP, as I was discussing UP a moment ago, and elsewhere, mainly signifies the tussle between emotive issues of community-based appeals and mobilizations versus practical issues of livelihood. Sometimes, for moments, and there come moments in a democracy when emotive issues sort of overpower the voters. Democracy is known for that. You can't take the capacity of these emotive issues to attract the voters as a permanent phenomenon. That is probably what these elections show. Then finally, in that last thing, there is an interesting point here that I would like to draw your attention to. Leave aside Tamil Nadu, but even if you look at Tamil Nadu and this list of states, Tamil Nadu, Punjab, Meghalaya, Mizoram, you would argue are small states, who bothers about them after all, but they are there. And if you look at this state where the BJP doesn't get an entrance so far, suddenly you will find that there is something common in these states, and that is they are far more peripheral to the idea of so-called India. They are far more peripheral to the idea of Hindu heartland. In various senses, they are far more diverse and plural from the Hindu point of view of the mainland. And precisely it is these territories, these social segments, where the BJP is finding hard to enter even after 10 years. So that is where the story of the political geography of the BJP, in a sense, completes. Before I turn to the larger issue of dominant party system, just one more slide and I am done with slides business. Please just look at, because you will be asking this question, if I say that we are into a dominant party system, you will be precisely asking this. So let me myself point it out, that this current Lok Sabha has as many as 41 parties. Of course, till recently we did have 30 plus parties, 36 parties, 34 parties was a common thing. For last two elections, that number came a little down, but now it has again gone up with 41. They are all small parties. At least 27 parties with less than 3 members at the most. So tiny individual based parties, but parties all the same. Then you have 7 parties which have members under 10, between 3 and 10. And only 5 parties having members between 10 and 40, serious contenders in politics. But once you enter into the coalition era, once you carve out an NDA 3, which is dependent upon your allies, parties with 1 and 2 members suddenly become extremely valuable, vulnerable also, and therefore this fact needs to be kept in mind. Fine. Let's therefore now turn to the larger question. Are we still in the era of dominant party system? Those who know the idea of dominant party system and also the debates about India's politics in the 1960s and the 70s would find that there is always a problem, in the sense that the dominant party system existed at the time when Congress was also at the same time a party that could catch people from here and there and everywhere. In other words, what Professor Rajani Kothari, the eminent political scientist of that era, called, he describes it as the Congress system. And there is some underlying connection between the two, though conceptually these two are different. Conceptually, a dominant party system can be there without something like a Congress system. But as we will see in a minute, you will find that a dominant party system does require some features that the Congress system also enjoyed in the 1960s till the late 1960s perhaps. In a purely numerical form, it simply means a dominant party system would simply mean that there is only one pole, there is only one dominant party which is likely to be the only all India party in all likelihood, which has a continued electoral dominance over a period of time, not just one election, but over a period of time, which is adequately or reasonably spread across this country, different states of the country, and probably exercises power both at the national and the subnational level, the state level. It's not just at the national level in Delhi. It also exercises powers in a number of states, maybe most states. On these parameters, as we have already noted, the BJP passes the test somewhere, doesn't pass the test fully. It has yet to enter some parts of the country, but I wouldn't worry much about that while calling the BJP a dominant party today, because if you look at the BJP in the last 10 years, and before 10 years nobody would have imagined, though signals were there, that BJP one day would become the ruling party in Odisha. BJP one day would be a ruling party in West Bengal. In spite of Mamata Banerjee's victory today, I would still stick my neck out and say that the next assembly elections, one wouldn't be surprised if BJP wins the assembly election. Might not win, but might win as well. Look at South. Till this election campaign was going on, there were people saying that South is different. BJP can't go South, Hindutva can't go South. I had argued in one of my pieces in the Indian Express that Karnataka is not an exception, but that is what portends for the future. In Tamil Nadu, we have had enough masala, enough material for Hindutva over a long period of time, with Vanniyars going, Hindu Munnani being aggressive, Vinayak Chaturthi being celebrated every month, and so on and so forth, and Jayalalitha supporting RSS. All masala was there. It is only a matter of time that finally electorally BJP enters in the bipolarity of the Dravid parties. That moment has now arrived with the fall of the AIADMK, the split and its overall decline, and the BJP is now capturing that space, both upper caste and Vanniyar support, and the Hindutva sentiments being exploited. In Kerala, and that is ironical, in the decline of the left lies the strength of the BJP currently. This time, two of the main voters of the left, the Nayars and the Iravas, voted BJP. And that is how BJP's vote share has gone up. The BJP has been trying to appropriate Shri Narayan Guru's legacy in Kerala. So again, it's a matter of time where the bipolarity of Kerala-specific two-coalition thing would be breached, and either of the players would be eased out, moved away, and the BJP would sort of position itself as the main player there. So then I would say that in spite of these setbacks that I have listed, the BJP seems to have the capacity historically over the last 3 decades, since 1990, 89 was their watershed election in this sense, they have displayed this capacity to enter into new territories, to win state assembly elections, by hook or by crook of course, but yes, they win state assembly elections, and therefore on that descriptive aspect of dominant party system, I don't think there is any doubt that the BJP is shaping as, has almost shaped as the dominant party in those senses. What happens in a dominant system, party system further is that because of the dominant party, there is no clear opposition with O capital. And therefore, you have to cobble up non-ideological coalitions, alliances, in opposition to the dominant party. And they have this genetic problem that because they are non-ideological, they can be easily targeted by saying that, look, these are opportunistic people trying to come together just because they want to displace us. That kind of conversation would now begin with the BJP now facing a strong, slightly strong India coalition if it remains, the India coalition remains intact. What also happens in a dominant party system is that ideas are stolen easily by the dominant party system, by the dominant party. So if you come up with a brilliant idea, let's say of caste census, supposing you might not agree, but supposing that it's a brilliant idea, the dominant party can actually take out the energy of that idea or that idea itself. That is easily possible for the dominant party system. More easy for the dominant party is to take away, and there is a gravitational force. Persons, tall leaders, individuals or groups within parties move and block from one party to the other, particularly to the dominant party. So, in terms of social blocks, in terms of political leaders, actors, and in terms of ideas, the dominant party system means that the dominant party has the ability to gravitate towards it, all these things, denuding the opposition of ideas, personnel or social blocks. If time permits, we will discuss it later, but look at the Congress today. It has a flat social support. It doesn't have social support from any particular social segment in addition to its average. If it has 20% votes, it gets just about 20% votes from everywhere. Nothing great about that. So it is this function of the dominant party system that seems to be intact in the current competitive politics, and therefore, but then let's before I conclude this point, let me add one more point to it. The dominant party system also means that democratic procedures, the nuances and niceties of competitive politics, the fairness of elections, everything in a sense is hostage to the sweet will of the dominant party. So long as the dominant party says, okay, we will play the game by the rules, the game goes on by the rules. The moment the dominant party says, we are fed up with the rules, now we will have our own rules, you can't then complain, because that is how the dominant party plays the game. And that is precisely the problem with the BJP in the last 5 years, and as I would argue at the end, is going to be the problem with the BJP in the future as well. That if you are a dominant party, it is only up to you to self-regulate and say that, okay, we will go only this far in sort of sabotaging the system and not beyond that. Because after all, every dominant party would try to sabotage the system, no doubt about that. Congress did it, no doubt. And finally, the Congress sort of stopped entertaining democratic procedures, momentarily at least, in 1975. So, if we have any lessons to learn from the first dominant party system, we can imagine what the second dominant party system could do, or what worse it can do from what happened earlier. Okay, now let's go back from this abstract discussion to BJP once more. How does BJP's dominance look like today? I would call it truncated dominance, no doubt. I am aware of the fact that the BJP, obviously if you compare with the classical dominance of the Congress party of the 1960s, you can't compare BJP with that, because Congress was far more dominant that time in different ways than the BJP today is. But when you theorize, when you create abstract models or types, you don't expect every reality to approximate that ideal. And therefore, I am not worried. I would say that BJP's dominance is a truncated dominance. That truncated dominance, as we have already discussed, can be manifest in a number of ways. Just that slide. I think we have one more slide, so let's look at it. Yeah. I will dwell upon this because a dominant party has to be an umbrella, always, or like a rainbow coalition, as the Congress was historically called by many scholars. So what does the BJP's umbrella look like? Now you are a dominant party, you take everyone along with you, sabka saath, which is a compulsion of being a dominant party. How do you fulfill that obligation of being a dominant party? The most stark feature of the BJP umbrella's limitation, of course, is that it gets only 8% support from the Muslims, and not surprisingly, because if you keep abusing Muslims right now and every moment, you don't expect Muslims to vote for you. So that's either on purpose, or that is pure political naivety to complain later that Muslims don't vote for us. I suspect that BJP doesn't care a hoot for Muslim votes. And therefore, if you are an umbrella, if you are a dominant party, but exclude something like 13-14% of the population entirely, then your dominance is going to remain truncated in any case. The second thing is that you have a cramped place, as I would call it, for, as I mentioned earlier, various peripheries. It's not just about Muslims at the end, it's also about the Dravids, it's also about the different religious traditions of Adivasis, it's also about how the Northeasterns look and how they don't follow the idea of not eating beef. It's also about the Goans and the Keralites not being very comfortable with the beef ban. Everything therefore then comes and boils down to this, that you have a certain imagination of what India is, and therefore it's not just the Muslim but all marginals, geographical marginals particularly, get a very cramped place both in your cabinet but more in your electorate. They don't really have your electorate as such. Then this umbrella is very partial to certain sections of the society. It shadows, shades, protects certain communities more particularly, and they also reciprocate by supporting the BJP more. These two segments, though they don't necessarily craft BJP's electoral victory, but they are crucial in BJP's policy universe. They are the upper castes and the upper classes, the rich. They support more among them support the BJP. These are the figures from our National Election Study 2024, whereas the average support for the BJP is 36-37%, among upper castes, more than 50% support the BJP. And almost 41 plus or 41% support the BJP among the rich. So that's the skew of this umbrella. Slightly less popular, less successful in rural than in urban, but I wouldn't harp upon this because BJP is catching up on this and really penetrating rural territories as well. The real weak point for the BJP currently is actually not the rural but the semi-urban. The semi-urban localities in the country are much more disturbed by the current turn of the economy, and we found therefore that it is there that the BJP's success rate is actually much less, and only 42% there support the BJP. I'm sorry, I should repeat myself. We divided the constituencies by the predominant nature of their population, and in the semi-urban constituencies, the success rate of the BJP was only 42%, whereas among highly urban constituencies, it was 54%. So that's something that the BJP probably will have to work out. Finally, and that is the real thing that would jar the BJP much more, because the current BJP is groomed and brought up only in the shadow of a tall leader, Mr. Narendra Modi. We asked a question: would you vote differently if Narendra Modi had not been the candidate for PM? And among BJP voters, those who say yes, we would have voted differently if Modi had not been PM candidate, is almost 1/4 of the BJP voters. That is, every one of the 4 BJP voters mainly vote because of Modi. And if, as I argued earlier, the charisma, as they call it, the popularity and attraction of Modi goes down slightly, these votes may shift. That is normal election. That is normal politics. In a normal politics, you don't give your permanent loyalty to a leader. In India also, we would have witnessed the same if Nehru had survived for the 1967 election. So this is not something extraordinary. This is a normal politics that would happen. So populist leaders all over the world have a general lifeline of maybe a decade or so. Mr. Modi seems to have outgrown that general pattern globally, but at the same time is now facing the wages of that popularity because as the popularity stabilizes or goes down, as people get habituated or used to your being a popular leader, people start asking other questions, and therefore you remain popular, but you don't encash that popularity in terms of votes and seats. So this is the truncated dominance that we have as far as the BJP is concerned. So the question is, would this mean that the BJP would therefore give up its larger project of hegemonization, establishing hegemony? I would say that that is unlikely to happen. The BJP is not likely to give up that project. The NDA will in fact give more acceptability to that project. And as I said, I had made two arguments before the election results. One was that in South, BJP would move with its Hindutva. Secondly, I had said that in North, Hindutva might have limitations in encashing votes. Both things have happened. UP, Haryana, Bihar, Jharkhand, though not in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, elsewhere in these Hindi-speaking Hindu belt, cow belt, whatever way you want to call it, the BJP has been sort of given a warning, if not a complete drubbing. In UP, of course, it's more than a warning, but elsewhere also there is a warning to the BJP. So that is what I called the Hindutva fatigue. And BJP's hegemonic project here onwards would continue with these two limitations. That in the North, it will have to use state power to sort of satisfy its electorate, and in the South, there would be more Hindutva rhetoric in order to make itself more popular, mobilize the cadres and mobilize the voters alike. So then, let me conclude in the last 5 minutes by asking this question: what ahead? In terms of ifs and buts, the first if, it's not really an if, but let me hopefully call it an if. What if the India bloc falls apart? And as I said, I might not have said if because it will fall apart. Given its internal problems, not just problems of personality, but this very normal thing that every party wants to expand itself. And in its expansion, every alliance then is a hurdle. So without accusing any party, I would say that it is quite natural that once elections are done and dusted, the India bloc might have served its purpose and they would be back to their original politics as usual for the time being. Till the BJP sort of raises the stick, they would fall apart. Once the BJP raises the stick, they would reassemble, probably. The second if is, what if the BJP splits, or just let's not use the word BJP splits, if various parties split, because parties split on their own volition, as in Maharashtra we know, nobody splits them, they split on their own. So if parties split, various parties, smaller parties to begin with, and defections will continue to happen, and that entire process would therefore weaken the current balance that this election has sort of restored. What this election has done is that it has restored the balance between the dominant party and the opposition. Now that restored balance would probably go away if the opposition implodes. If they break away, they split, their parties split and so on and so forth. If you have large numbers, there is reason for the party members and MLAs or MPs to split the party, as in the case of Trinamool Congress, which might happen. If you are a small party, it's even easy to a bloc get up and join the BJP or the dominant party and its alliance. So that's the two things. Then the spectre of simultaneous elections is there. If the BJP roughshods its alliance partners and decides to go ahead with simultaneous election plans, then the dominance of a single party would reappear. Though simultaneous elections have their own problems otherwise also, one immediate result of the simultaneous election phenomenon would be that one party is likely to get undue advantage of that shift, that move to a new system. If that doesn't happen, nobody would stop Mr. Narendra Modi after a year and a half to say that I want to see a great India in 2047, but for that give me better powers today. Midterm election. For a for a dominant party, when its back is to the wall, one strategy it has available is to bounce back by saying that I will call your bluff, have the elections, and get a little more seats, maybe thumping majority. Who knows? Finally, the third set of ifs is, in the immediate future, this government will probably face, and this is not something that I am saying, I am the only one to say, this is one of the arguments made by even Mr. Prashant Kishore, there would be a slew of protests and popular unrests in different arenas. We can't foresee those arenas, though farmers' agitations in the north-northwest have already been on the boil for some time, and agrarian distress is already there. But we can't also rule out the possibility of caste-based and reservation demands-based unrests in different parts. Maharashtra is probably one among them, but the Patel issue and the Jat issue resurfacing, and thus the whole reservation question being revisited one way or the other and becoming a festering kind of wound once more. The enforcement of the NRC, if this government tries to do that, could now, with a more alert Muslim community and a larger opposition, can be another flare point, flashpoint in the politics. And finally, given the way the BJP behaves with state governments, regionalism-based unrests, movements can emerge. Because obviously, an RJD or a Trinamool Congress cannot go to the people arguing theoretically about governors sort of interfering in their powers, or the center not giving them enough resources. So it would be regionalist demands and regionalist sentiments pitted against Delhi. That kind of a confrontation is also one possibility. So then, to answer the question that I began with, what is in store for us? If this is the likely situation, I would say that 3 or 4 things in conclusion are likely to happen in terms of continuity. Media is very sort of romantically connected currently with the idea of continuation of this Modi 3, how everything continues the same. So let me also join the media chorus and tell you what is likely to continue in the next 2, 3, 4 years in Indian politics. The first, what we have seen in last 5 years, almost daily, if we were diligent observers of politics and constitution, is the complete demolition of institutions of various kinds. So that decline will continue. Even after demolition, they would be destroyed and demolished further. The police, the investigating agencies would be further demoralized. They would be further penetrated by party cadres, and therefore institutional decline of the administration and the police administration. But I unfortunately suspect and fear the decline also of the armed forces will happen. Politicization of the armed forces has already begun, and that would continue. So that's one continuity from Modi 2 to Modi 3. The second is a complete sidelining, reinterpretation or minimization of the federal contract. Because one of the beautiful things about India 1947 is this social contract, that it would be a federation. Whatever name you give it, you don't call it federation, you call it union of states, all sorts of things. But after all, there was a social contract. And violation of that social contract has been the hallmark of past 5 years, with the help of governors, with the help of investigating agencies. That would continue without any breaks. JDU and TDP are both intellectually and politically completely incapable of putting a halt to that. They won't do it, so don't expect anything from them. Third is the constriction of civil society. The civil society is again a very omnibus term. Basically, it is the complete control of the social order, because that's in tune with the hegemonic project of the BJP, that they need to entirely control the social order, not just politics. The main difference that people generally forget when they sort of keep glibly comparing Congress and the BJP, showing for every bad thing the BJP has done, another bad thing the Congress has done, is this, that the Congress was completely devoid of any clarity about what kind of hegemony to impose, whereas BJP begins with a hegemonic project in 1980, in 1951 when its original party began, and in 1925 when its original organization began. So it is a century-long hegemony project of controlling the social order. That will continue. That will not stop. But for that project to continue, they need to reciprocally control alternative social processes and social mushroomings of ideas, organizations, thoughts, and activities. That would lead to more control of various civil society organizations in the next 5 years at the hands of the government. And finally, in the economic realm, though I don't want to step into that much, this two crutches on the economy has currently sort of been governed by the BJP-led government so far, will continue. The two crutches are, on the one hand, oligopoly, whatever name you want to give, but there is a set of corporate capital which are cozy with the government, and secondly, a complete tight control of the rest of the corporate sector. These are the two crutches on the BJP's economic policy of the last 5 years. That will continue. Its love affair, for example, with the oligopolistic capital will continue, and its strong stick approach, a very strict control approach for the rest, will also continue. That is the way in which it would try to extract much from the economy for the macroeconomic parameters to look good, etc., etc. Friends, this is not a very rosy picture that I am drawing before you. But I suspect that rather than celebrating a loss of 60 seats and saying that democracy has returned, it would be much better if we said that yes, some warning signals have been given, but that doesn't make India's democracy foolproof. And in any case, democracy is never foolproof unless parties and citizens are ready to look at the rulers with suspicion. The moment we suspend disbelief and start looking at our rulers as demigods, we have lost the battle. If we have lost that battle in last 5 years, there is no reason why we would be winning that battle suddenly on 4th June. Thank you.
नमस्कार. मी मराठीत बोलणार आहे. मराठीत एक खूप जुनं वृत्तपत्र आहे, अजूनही आहे ते. त्या काळातले, अगदी सुरुवातीच्या काळातले त्याचे अग्रलेख असे असत. आमचे पत्र मित्रकर्ते अमुक अमुक त्यांच्या अग्रलेखात म्हणतात की, म्हणून तो सगळा अग्रलेख जशाचा तसा उद्धृत केला जायचा आणि शेवटचं वाक्य असायचं की आमचंही असेच मत आहे. म्हणजे आमचंही असेच मत नाही म्हटलं तर मग ते जस्टिफाय करायला लागतं. माझंही असेच मत आहे. फक्त माझ्या पुढच्या पत्रकार म्हणून मी ज्या निवडणुका गेल्या 1978 पासूनच्या सगळ्या निवडणुका पाहिल्या, त्या निवडणुका आणि यावर्षीची निवडणूक यात काही फरक आहे का, दिसतो का, असं सारखं तपासलं जातं आपल्या पातळीवर. मुद्दा यानंतर काय होणार हा आहे. त्याचं फार सुंदर विवेचन सुहास पळशीकरांनी केलं. आत्ता जे भाजपच्या अंतर्गत चर्चा चालल्या आहेत त्याच्याकडे आपण जरा बारकाईनं लक्ष द्यायला हवं. ती अशी की आत्ताच आपण 240वरच थांबलो आणि ते मोदी असताना 240 मिळालेत. अजून 5 वर्षांनी आपलं काय होणार आहे कोणाला माहीत. या भीतीनं आत्ता देशातला भारतीय जनता पक्ष हळूहळू घाबरायला लागलेला आहे. आता घाबरायला लागलं याचा अर्थ आता काय संपलं असं काय गळाटून जाण्यासारखी परिस्थिती भाजपत कधी नसते. 2 खासदार असतानाही भाजप गळाटलेला होताच. प्रश्न पुढचा आहे, आत्तापर्यंत एक इलेक्शन विनिंग मशीन तुमच्याकडे होतं, अमित शहा आणि नरेंद्र मोदी. हे मशीन नसेल तर आपण या इलेक्शनमध्ये पुढं काय करणार आहोत असा प्रश्न भाजपच्या अंतर्गत आत्ता विचारला जायला लागला आहे ऑलरेडी. हे सगळं फार काय म्हणतात त्याला, अतिशय दबक्या आवाजात शेजारच्याला सुद्धा कळू नये, शक्यतो बायकोला पण आपण काय बोलतोय कळू नये इतक्या हळू आवाजात, पण हे चालू आहे. हे चालू आहे याचं कारण असं की ज्या 2 राज्यात आपण कमालीचं दुर्लक्ष आणि अगदी खरं सांगायचं तर ठरवून केलेलं दुर्लक्ष, उमेदवार निवडीपासून निवडीला होणाऱ्या विलंबापर्यंत, या 2 राज्यातल्या गेलेल्या सीट्स नुसत्या गोळा केल्या तर ते 272ला पोचतच होते. आणि 400 पार हे त्यांनाही माहिती होतं की आपण 400 पार नाही जाणार, पण 272 पण नाही गेलो ह्याचं दुःख भाजपच्या अंतर्गत प्रचंड मोठ्या प्रमाणात आहे. सुहास पळशीकर फार चांगले आणि नशीबवान आहेत, त्यांच्याकडे व्हॉट्सॲप नाही. आपण सगळे त्याला इतके बळी पडलेले आहोत. आणि व्हॉट्सॲप म्हणजे आता काय झालं, गेल्या रिझल्टपासून आत्तापर्यंत अगदी आज अखेरपर्यंत हे सगळं कसं कंट्रोल करायचं आपलं डॅमेज, असा प्रश्न BJPतल्या दुड्डाचार्यांना पण पडला आहे. म्हणजे ज्या क्षणी मोदींनी पक्ष कार्यालय ते उशिरा वगैरे ते सोडून द्यायचे, व्हॉट्सॲप विद्यापीठात द्यायचं कारण नाही, पण आता मीच परत पंतप्रधान होणार हे जेव्हा त्यांनी जाहीर केलं तेव्हा जे काय म्हणजे गार पाण्यानं आंघोळ केल्यासारखं झालं भाजपाच्या सगळ्या लोकांना. ते वातावरण यापुढील काळात, हे 5 वर्ष म्हणतात, मी तर म्हणतो की 1-2 वर्ष टिकेल की नाही असा प्रश्न आता भाजपमध्ये चर्चेला जात आहे. याचं कारण असं की ज्या पद्धतीचं राजकारण अगदी गेल्या 3-4 दशकांपासून भाजप करत आहे. मी तुम्हाला किस्सा सांगतो. 1990च्या दशकात प्रमोद महाजननं पुढाकार घेऊन शिवसेनेबरोबर युती करायचं ठरवलं. माझे ते चांगले मित्र होते आणि मी त्यांना एकदा म्हटलं की यात काही गरज नाही ना, तुम्हाला महाराष्ट्रात दुसरा पक्ष घेऊन कशाला युती करायची आहे आणि असं तुम्हाला काय मिळणार आहे. हे खरं की तुम्ही तुमच्या ताकदीवर निवडून येऊच शकत नाही महाराष्ट्रात, म्हणजे एकटा भारतीय जनता पक्ष महाराष्ट्रात सत्ता मिळवू शकेल ही शक्यता नाही आहे, खरं आहे. पण तुम्ही घेऊन शिवसेना कशाला घेता. त्यावर त्यांचं जस्टिफिकेशन परफेक्ट होतं की ते मातीचा प्रश्न सोडून आता हिंदुत्वाकडे आलेत, आपला विषय तोच आहे. आणि तुला खाजगीत सांगतो, कधीतरी बाळासाहेब ठाकरेंनंतर सगळा पक्ष आपल्याच दांडीला बांधता येईल. आणि आपल्याला, हे त्यांचे शब्द आहेत, आपल्याला 2020 साली भाजपला स्वतःच्या ताकदीवर या देशात सत्ता मिळवायची आहे. प्लॅन 1980पासूनचा आहे, 40 वर्षांनंतरचा प्लॅन आहे की आपल्याला 2020मध्ये स्वतःच्या ताकदीवर भारतात सत्ता मिळवायची. तो जरा लवकरच झाला, तो कोॲलिशनमुळे झाला, स्वतःच्या ताकदीवर नाही झाला, पण त्यांनी ते करून पाहिलं. 13 दिवसाचं सरकार का विना करून पाहिलं. मुद्दा असा आहे की एक अटल बिहारी, म्हणजे भाजपसारख्या पक्षाचा जो प्रश्न आहे तो असा आहे की त्यांना एक असा माणूस लागतो की ज्याच्या भोवती सगळी प्रभावळ फिरत राहील, जी अटल बिहारींच्या भोवती होती, अडवाणींच्या भोवती नव्हती. आणि त्यानंतर ते सगळे असाच कोणीतरी एक हरीचा लाल जन्माला येईल अशा वाटेत होते आणि ते अचानक त्यांना मोदी मिळाले. मोदी प्रूव्ड, म्हणजे 14-19मध्ये त्यांनी सिद्ध केलं, काही न करताच त्यांना मतं मिळत गेली. ह्याचं जे काही राजकारण आहे आणि ह्याच्या मागचं जे सगळं ऑर्गनायझेशन आहे ते कमालीचं प्रोफेशनल आहे, हे लक्षात घ्या. वरवर दिसायला खूप सोपं दिसतं त्यांची भाषणं आणि त्याचं हे, पण त्यांचं इंटरनल लेवलवर एखाद्या कॉर्पोरेट लेवलला ज्या पद्धतीचं तयारी असते तशा तयारीनं त्यांनी ते केलं आणि त्यामुळे त्यांना तेवढी मतं मिळतील याची हमी त्यांनी घेतली. उज्ज्वला योजना त्यांनी आखली, तेवढी मतं मिळाली, योजना बंद केली. असा प्रॉब्लेम येत नाही. स्वच्छ भारत योजनेसाठी 24,000 50,000 कोटी दिले, योजना चालवली नाही. दिसताना पैसे दिले असे दिसेल. हे सगळं मेकॅनिझम भाजपनं गेल्या 10 वर्षात फार अप्रतिमपणे राबवलं. आता पुढचा मुद्दा असा आहे की येत्या 5 वर्षात भाजपला काय केलं असतं अजूनही, कारण त्यांचं आता स्वप्न असं की आता म्हणजे पुढची 100-1 वर्ष आम्हीच राहायला पाहिजे. पळशीकर सर म्हणाले ते बरोबर, असं राहता येत नाही, असं राहत नाही. निवडणूक हे काही शास्त्र नाही, राजकारण हे शास्त्र असेल, निवडणूक हे कदाचित टेक्निक असू शकेल. कारण निवडणुकीचा संबंध समाजाच्या मानसिकतेशी असतो. वी आर प्लेइंग विथ द सायकोलॉजी ऑफ द मासेस. आणि ही सायकोलॉजी सतत आपल्या काबूत ठेवणं, त्या संपूर्ण एका प्रचंड मोठ्या विविध भाषेतल्या, विविध संस्कृतीच्या, विविध प्रकारानं विचार करणाऱ्या आणि विविध प्रकारचे अनुभव असलेल्या समूहांना पकडून ठेवणं एखाद्या विशिष्ट पद्धतीनं, हे काम सोपं नाही. जे मला शेवटच्या ह्याच्यात त्यांनी सांगितलं ते मला फार जास्त योग्य वाटतं की दक्षिणेकडे हिंदुत्वावर भर द्यायचा आणि उत्तरेकडे हिंदुत्वावरचा भर कमी करायचा. पण इन एनी केस भाजप येत्या 5 वर्षातसुद्धा मुस्लिम समाजाला बरोबर घेण्याचा विचारही करू शकणार नाही. 2014च्या निवडणुकीत भाजपच्या एका वरिष्ठ नेत्याबरोबर माझी गप्पा मारण्याचा प्रसंग आला. तेव्हा ते म्हणाले, आम्ही काही मुसलमानांना मानत नाहीच, पण आमच्या या इलेक्शनमध्ये मुसलमानांविरुद्ध आम्ही एक वाक्यही काढत नाही. तुम्ही बघा, आम्ही सबका साथ सबका विकास म्हणतो. तेव्हा राम मंदिराचा विषय आम्ही मांडलाच नाही, आम्ही तो निवडणुकीचा मुद्दा केलाच नाही. ती खेळी यशस्वी झाली. 19ला त्यांना पुलवामा हाताशी आलं आणि विरोधकांना पुलवामा घडलं याचं कारण कोणीतरी आपल्या घरातून मारून आपल्याला गेलं, हे फार मोठं आपलं शल्य आहे, हे विरोधकांना समजावून सांगताच आलं नाही. त्यामुळे पुलवामा हाच हिरो झाला. घुसून मारलं हेच हिरो झालं. अरे घुसून मारलं, आपल्या काही घरात त्यांनी येऊन घुसून मारलं ना. हे ज्या पातळीवर पटवून देणं आवश्यक होतं समाजात, ते पटवून देता आलं नाही आणि त्यामुळे पुलवामा हा भाजपच्या बाजूनं आलेला विषय होता. 24च्या निवडणुकीत असा कुठलाच विषय नव्हता की ज्या विषयावर संपूर्ण इलेक्शन फिरवता येईल असं भाजपला एकही मुद्दा नव्हता. त्यामुळे तुम्ही सातत्यानं पाहत असाल तर सगळ्या भाजपच्या नेत्यांची सगळ्या प्रकारची भाषणं ही वेगवेगळ्या पातळीवर फिरत होती. एक सूत्र असं ठरवलं होतं की काँग्रेसला सतत विरोध करत राहायचा, काँग्रेसला शिव्या घालत राहायचं आणि काँग्रेस आलं तर अशी भीती घालायची, आलं तर तुमचं हे होईल, आलं तर तुमचं हे होईल. ह्या पातळीवर 240वर भाजप येणं हे भाजपच्या अंतर्गत गोटात शेवटपर्यंत खात्रीलायकरित्या माहीत नव्हतं, अंदाज नव्हता. 272 कसेबसे मिळवू आपण, म्हणजे सत्तेत येऊ आपण, पण इतके खाली आपण जाऊ अशी अपेक्षा भाजपातल्या शीर्षस्थ नेत्यांना पण नव्हती. आणि त्यामुळे इलेक्शन होता क्षणापासून आत्तापर्यंत आणि पुढचे काही काळ भाजपमध्ये ही सत्ता टिकवून ठेवायची असेल तर काय करायला लागेल याच्याबद्दलचं जे विचारमंथन चालू आहे, त्याच्याच बरोबरीनं हू आफ्टर मोदी ह्याचा विचार आत्ताच सुरू झाला. कारण एक लक्षात घ्या, मोदींचा जो करिश्मा आहे तो भाजपतला आत्ता असलेल्या एकाही नेत्याकडे नाही, ना अमित शहांकडे आहे किंवा अन्य कुठल्याही भाजपच्या अशा नेत्याकडे नाही की जो मोदींना इंटरनली आत्ता उभरता तारा म्हणून सुद्धा दाखवता येणार नाही. क्षितिजावर दिसतोय, लुकलुकतोय असं सुद्धा दिसत नाही. असं दिसूनही हीच तर व्यवस्था केली ना गेली 10 वर्ष. गेली 10 वर्ष त्यातच गेली की ते सगळं चित्र आपल्याभोवतीच रुंजी घालत राहील. आणि ही व्यवस्था करण्यासाठी त्यांच्याकडे एक मोठी प्रभावळ होती की तुम्हीच मोठे आहात हे म्हणणारं एक मंडळ होतं बरोबर. आणि त्यामुळे त्यांना हे साध्य करता आलं. पण येत्या 5 वर्षात, म्हणजे खरं 5 वर्षाच्या आधीच ही रिप्लेसमेंट कशी करता येईल आणि करायची असेल तर ती विचारांच्या पातळीवर करता येईल का, नेतृत्वाच्या पातळीवर करता येईल का आणि संघटनेच्या पातळीवर करता येईल का याचं विचारमंथन सुरू झालं. अशी एक बारीकशी चुणूक आपल्याला जे.पी. नड्डांच्या एका वाक्यात आली की नाव वी डोंट नीड RSS फॉर अस. हे वरवर दिसायला कदाचित सोपं वाक्य वाटू शकेल, पण त्यानंतर लगेचच मोहन भागवत यांनी मणिपूरमध्ये केलेलं वक्तव्य हे त्याचं कशा पद्धतीनं सटल रिटॅलिएशन होतं हे पण आपण पाहू शकता. मला नेहमी असं वाटत आलं की 80 साली जर 2020चं स्वप्न ते पाहत असतील तर 2029च्या पातळीवर काय करायचं याचा विचार त्यांनी ऑलरेडी 2019पासूनच सुरू केला असणार. तो स्पष्ट व्हायला अजून एखाद 2 वर्ष जातील. पण काँग्रेस महाराष्ट्रात किंवा भारतात टक्केवारीनं अत्यंत बरोबर आहे. 1% कमी झालं आणि त्यांच्या एवढ्या जागा वाढल्या. पण काँग्रेस स्वतःच्या ताकदीनं किंवा आपल्या अंतर्गत क्षमतांमुळे वाढलं असं मला वाटत नाही. तुमचं मत कदाचित वेगळं असेल, पण काँग्रेसचा हा उदय काँग्रेसला कदाचित हवा भरून देणारा वाटू शकेल. पण त्यानं काँग्रेसच्या अंतर्गत असलेलं जे राजकारण आहे, जे मगाशी पळशीकर सर म्हणाले ते बरोबर आहे, पक्षसुद्धा अंतर्गत फुटतील. काँग्रेसमध्ये अशी महत्त्वाकांक्षा बाळगणारे लोक आता शिल्लकच राहिलेले नाहीत. त्यामुळे तुम्ही वर राहा, आम्ही कपडे सांभाळतो या पातळीवरच चालतं. पण राज्य पातळीवरचे स्थानिक अस्मिता असणारे पक्ष आता जास्त मोठ्या प्रमाणात वाढायला लागतील, जे महाराष्ट्रात आपण पाहिलं. म्हणजे महाराष्ट्रात अनपेक्षितरित्या काँग्रेसला म्हणजे आघाडीतल्या तिघांपैकी दोघांनीही काँग्रेसला कटाप केलेलं होतं, म्हणजे वाळीत टाकलेलं होतं, अक्षरशः वाळीत टाकलेलं होतं. म्हणजे किंमतच दिली होती आणि तो पक्ष या 2 पक्षांपेक्षाही पुढं गेला. याचा अर्थ काँग्रेस रिवाईव्ह होतं आहे महाराष्ट्रात असं मुळीच घेण्याचं कारण नाही. महाराष्ट्रात भाजपला मिळालेलं अपयश हे केंद्रातील भाजपच्या घटनांमुळे घडलेलं नसून भाजपच्या शीर्षस्थ नेत्यांमधल्या हेव्यादाव्यांमुळे आणि खरं सांगायचं ते इगोमुळे घडलेलं आहे. आणि हे इगो पक्षाला स्थानिक पातळीवर किती खालपर्यंत नेऊ शकतील ह्याचं एक उदाहरण महाराष्ट्राच्या निमित्तानं भाजपला मिळालं. असंच काही प्रमाणात उत्तर प्रदेशातही झालं. त्याचं पॉलिटिकल ॲनालिसिस वेगळ्या पातळीवर होऊ शकतं. खाजगीत जे लोक सांगतात ते नाव घेऊन सांगणं बरोबर नाही, सांगताही कामा नये, कारण ते विश्वासानं सांगतात. काही गोष्टी ठरवून घडतात, ठरवून केल्या जातात आणि हे सगळं पुढच्या 5 वर्षाचं, 10 वर्षाचं, 20 वर्षाचं प्लॅनिंग धरून गणितं. हे कसं आहे, बुद्धिबळातली 122वी खेळी काय असेल याचा विचार पहिल्या खेळीच्याच वेळेला करायला लागतो. आणि असा विचार करणारी माणसं राजकारणात वेगवेगळ्या पद्धतीच्या खेळ्या खेळत राहतात. त्यामुळे माझ्या दृष्टीनं पुढची 5 वर्ष जास्त देश म्हणून आपल्यासमोर जास्त अडचणीची असण्याची शक्यता आहे. मोदींचं काय होईल, भाजपचं काय होईल, सरकारचं काय होईल, हा जसा प्रश्न आपल्या सगळ्यांपुढे आहे, तसाच पक्ष म्हणून आणि देश म्हणून आणि देशाचा कारभार म्हणून गेल्या 10 वर्षात भारतीय जनता पक्षाला अनेक पातळ्यांवर कमालीचं मोठं अपयश आलं. हे अपयश त्यांच्या राजकीय महत्त्वाकांक्षेनं आणि त्यांच्या पॉप्युलरिटीच्या पातळीवर ते दाबून टाकू शकले. आता 240 असताना ते दाबून टाकणं त्यांना अवघड जाईल असं मला वाटतं. मी अगदी कालच परत अडाणींना अजून एका कुठलं तरी विमानतळ दिल्याची कालचीच बातमी आहे. हे जर असंच चालू राहिलं ना तर सामान्य माणसाच्या मनात एक साधा प्रश्न कायम गेली 10 वर्ष तो पडला की वर्षाला नोकऱ्यांची गरज आहे 1 कोटी आणि मिळतात 10 लाख. हे आपलं महाभारताचं गणित आहे. आपल्याला दर वर्षाला 1 कोटी मुलं नोकरी योग्य शिक्षण घेऊन बाजारात येतात, त्यातल्या 10 लाखांना नोकऱ्या मिळतात. हे जर असंच चालू राहिलं तर येत्या 1-2 वर्षात ते रिटेलिएट होणार नाही असं कृपया समजायचं कारण नाही. कारण ज्या पद्धतीनं आत्ता विरोध सरफेस झाला, वेगळ्या पातळ्यांवर झाला, तो नुसत्या पॉप्युलॅरिटीच्या पातळीवर नाही. पण काही ना काही कारणानं हा विरोध व्यक्त झाला असेलच, तर तो आता अनेक वाटांनी कदाचित अजून वेगळ्या पद्धतीनं बाहेर पडू शकतो. 3 महिन्यात महाराष्ट्रात इलेक्शन्स आहेत, अन्य अनेक राज्यात विधानसभा निवडणुका आहेत. या विधानसभा निवडणुकांमध्ये सुद्धा आपल्याला हे चित्र वेगळ्या वेगळ्या पद्धतीनं त्याच्यात अनेक रंग मिसळले जाणार आहेत येत्या 3 महिन्यात. आणि हे आपण हे आत्ता त्याची सुरुवात ऑलरेडी झाली. म्हणजे ज्या पद्धतीनं फडणवीसांनी निवडणुकीचे निकाल लागताच वक्तव्य केलं की मला पदावरून मोकळं व्हायचं आहे, इथपासून पक्षांतर्गत राजकारण, मी बंडाळी हा शब्द वापरत नाही, पक्षांतर्गत राजकारणाला सुरुवात झाली. आणि याचे पडसाद आपल्याला येत्या विधानसभा निवडणुकीत दिसतील. 14 नंतरचा भारत, सेफ्रनायझेशन ऑफ द इंडिया जे झालं होतं ते 19 नंतर हळूहळू कमी होत गेलं. आत्ता भारताचा नकाशा पाहिला तर तुम्हाला खूप कमी ठिकाणी ते दिसेल. पण दक्षिणेत हळूहळू त्यांचा परत दक्षिणेत घुसून मिळवण्याचा प्लॅन अजून 20 वर्षानंतरचा असेल, कदाचित 10 वर्षात त्यांना यशही मिळेल. प्रश्न असा आहे की देश म्हणून संपूर्ण 140 कोटी जनतेपैकी 22% 25% जनतेला एकत्र ठेवण्याचं आहे. निवडून येण्यासाठी तेवढीच खरी जनता आपल्या खिशात असावी लागते. एका भाजपच्या नेत्याला मी म्हटलं की तुम्ही झोपडपट्टीत वगैरे जात नाही. तो म्हटलं पूर्वी असं असायचं, मी आगाशी येत आहेत, आम्ही जेव्हा सुरुवातीला जर्नलिझममध्ये होतो तेव्हा मतदान खूप झालं की काँग्रेस येणार असं सोपं गणित होतं. आता उलटं आहे, आता मतदान जास्त झालं की भाजप येणार. हे इक्वेशन बदललं गेल्या 4-5 दशकांमध्ये. मुद्दा असा आहे की नुसतं मतदान वाढवायचं असेल तर ॲक्च्युअल निवडून येण्यासाठी किती मतं लागतात ह्याचा विचार, ह्याचा अभ्यास तुम्हाला कल्पना नाही. प्रत्येक पक्ष या पद्धतीचा अभ्यास करतो, पण हा प्रोफेशनल लेवलवर केला जातो. जे सर्वेज आता यांच्या संस्थांनी केले आणि जे खरे ठरले असे अनेक सर्वे भाजपनं अंतर्गत पातळीवर केले आणि ते दर आठवड्याला सर्वे करायचे. त्या सर्वेमध्ये काम करणारे माझ्या वृत्तपत्रात काम करणारे अनेक माजी सहकारी त्या सर्वेमध्ये प्रमुख पदावर आहेत. ते सांगायचे दर आठवड्याला वेगळ्या पातळीवरचे सर्वे करून ते सगळे सर्वे फसले. याचा अर्थ आपल्याला हवा तसा रिझल्ट मिळेल असेच सर्वे केले का सर्वेचं टेक्निक चुकलं का त्याचं शास्त्र चुकलं हे याची कल्पना नाही. पण ज्याच्या आधारावर त्यांनी या निवडणुका लढवल्या तो आधार हळूहळू विस्विषित तर होत चाललेला नाही ना, याची जाणीव, याची चुणूक या निवडणुकीनं भाजपला दिली. पण त्याचबरोबर भाजपला विरोध करणाऱ्या सर्व पक्षांना जी काही बारीकशी दुगदुगी जमा झालेली आहे ती दुगदुगी त्यांना सत्तेत पोचण्यापर्यंत फारशी उपयोगी ठरणार नाही नजीकच्या भविष्यकाळात, हेही तेवढंच खरं. त्यामुळे 2029पर्यंत काही फार वाट पाहायची गरज आहे असं मला वाटत नाही. काय घडेल आपण काय ते कुंडलीतला चंद्र कुठे आणि शुक्र कुठे हे बघून सांगणारी माणसं नाही होत. एक अनुभवातून आलेलं गोष्टी असतात, त्यातून इतका युफोरिया आजपर्यंत भारतानं पाहिला नाही. जो इंदिरा गांधींच्या काळातसुद्धा होता पण तोही इतका नव्हता. नेहरूंच्या काळात असेल, मी तेव्हा फारच लहान होतो. पण हा एकच त्राता आहे आणि हा एकच या संपूर्ण देशाचं भलं करू शकण्याची क्षमता असणारा काय कृष्ण राम काय जे आहे ते, हे चित्र हळूहळू कमी होत जाईल. आणि शेवटी निवडणूक ही जर सायकी असेल समाजाची आणि संपूर्ण समाजाला तुम्ही कधीच एकाच वेळेला खुश ठेवू शकत नाही आणि सततही खुश ठेवू शकत नाही, पण लांगुलचालनही सतत करू शकत नाही. अशा एका ट्रिकी अवस्थेमध्ये तुम्हाला पुढची 1, 2, 2.5 वर्ष काढायची आहेत आणि तुम्हाला तुमचा नवा शीर्षस्थ नेता शोधायचा आहे, ज्या नेत्याच्या बरोबर तुम्हाला जर तुमची इच्छा असेल तर पुढची अजून 5-10 वर्ष राजकारणात टिकून राहण्यासाठी महत्त्वाच्या ठिकाणी. ही लढाई सत्ताधारी पक्षालाच करावी लागणार आहे. विरोधकांसमोर ची आव्हानं वेगळी आहेत आणि सत्ताधारी पक्षासमोरची आव्हानं वेगळी आहेत. ही इलेक्शन सत्ताधारी पक्षाला आणि विरोधकांना या वेगवेगळ्या पातळ्यांवर खूप महत्त्वाचे संदेश देणारी ठरली असं मला वाटतं. सुहास पळशीकर हे माझे मित्र आहेत आणि मी पण तुमच्यासारखाच त्यांचं सतत वाचत असतो. मी आज भाषण ऐकायला आलो होतो आणि म्हणून मी सुरुवात केली की ते जे काय म्हणाले ते मलाही मान्य आहे. पण ते नुसतं मान्य नाही, त्याची जी शास्त्रीय मांडणी एखाद्या विषयाची करायची असते ती आकडेवारीनं, प्रमेयाच्या साहाय्यानं, सिद्धांताच्या साहाय्यानं आणि अनुभवाच्या साहाय्यानं करायची असते. आणि हे करत असताना आजपर्यंत घडलेल्या इतिहासाचा आधार घ्यायचा असतो. तो आधार त्यांनी इतका अप्रतिम पद्धतीनं घेतला, अत्यंत सटली घेतला आणि त्यामुळे ते विवेचन अतिशय सुबोध, सोपं आणि तरीही अतिशय विचारप्रवर्तक होतं असं मला वाटतं. तुम्ही सगळ्यांनी माझं भाषण ऐकलं त्याबद्दल तुमचे आभार. त्यांचं तुम्ही ऐकायलाच आलेले होतात. त्यांचं भाषण फार चांगलं झालं याबद्दल त्यांचं अभिनंदन आणि त्यांचेही आभार. धन्यवाद.
We'll open the floor for question and answers, and I would just like to, I'll just come there and Professor Palshikar, just two quick questions. You spoke of continuity. Initially you spoke of economic distress being one of the disappointing factors, and you said sooner or later the BJP will secure West Bengal. The two questions that I have are, what is the course correction that one may expect? For example, now already changes are being announced in the Agniveer scheme. And the second question is, what should one expect in Maharashtra Assembly elections 3 months from now?
My question is to Professor Suhas Palshikar. What do you think the possibility of Mr. Nitin Gadkari taking over the entire game?
Can we take discussion to a slightly different level? Conceptually, do you think what has happened is a classical Hegelian dialectic? There was one thesis ruling India for 70 years. Then the antithesis came to power. And now probably in this election we see a synthesis emerging. Why are we so, what should I say, feeling let down about what has happened? I feel that it's a very natural kind of evolution that has happened in the society. And this is what's going to happen in future also. I am very optimistic about what has happened. Electorate has its own way of teaching lessons and learning lessons also. And this is nothing but Hegelian dialectic. You have a synthesis emerging and it will keep on emerging. Thank you. I would like to have your comments on this.
Yeah, one more question from the gentleman here, and then sir you could.
Just
Yeah, there it is.
two questions actually. One for Dr. Palshikar. You said in the first part that 180 seats would mean that the BJP may not have formed the government. I would like to understand your logic. If BJP would have made it to 180 seats, like technically if you look at it, BJP is 180 seats. They lost 82 of their seats and they gained 21 seats from completely new constituencies. Those 82 seats were mostly like the BSP, which played, maybe took away many votes, 50,000 plus votes or whatever. So about 44 seats are just 50,000 margin. So you said if the BJP would have made it to about between 180 to 200 seats, they perhaps may not have formed the government. So I'd like to understand the logic behind that. तुमच्यासाठी एक प्रश्न आहे मुकुंद सर. एक भावी प्रधानमंत्री आहे महाराष्ट्रात गेले 32 वर्ष आणि आत्ता संधी अशी होती, म्हणजे अर्ध भाजप जे आपल्याला सगळ्यांना माहिती आहे ते ज्योतिरादित्य सिंधियापासून तर ते आसामच्या सोनोवालपर्यंत अर्धे भाजपचे खासदार सगळे बाहेरचेच आहेत, कोण काँग्रेसचे आहेत, कोण इतर जे काय आहेत ते. तर हे जे भावी प्रधानमंत्री आहेत ह्यांना ही एक मौका होती असं मला वाटतं. जे त्यांच्याबरोबर झालं, जसं तुम्ही म्हणता पक्ष आपोआप कधी कधी एकमेकांमध्ये विलीन होतात, कधी अर्धे होतात, कधी काय होतात. तर भाजपला अर्ध पाडण्याचा अशी एक संधी होती. तर ती संधी सोडली गेली, आली होती, काय झालेलं खरं पाठीमागची काय तुमच्यापर्यंत काय पोचलं त्याची माहिती थोडी आम्हाला द्यावी. थँक्यू सर.
प्रश्न सोपा आहे म्हणून मी आधी उत्तर देतो. यांची उत्तरं अवघड आहेत, म्हणजे गुंतागुंतीची आहेत. पंतप्रधान होण्याची इच्छा असणारे महाराष्ट्रात खूप आहेत आणि तुम्हाला खाजगीत सांगायचं, पण आता काय आपण जाहीरच बोलतो तो खाजगी काय असणार. शरद पवारांना जे पंतप्रधान व्हायची इच्छा आहे असं लोक म्हणत होते. शरद पवारांनी तशी इच्छा कधी नव्हती असं अजिबात नाही. त्यांनी कधी जाहीर बोलून दाखवलं नसेल. त्यांनी प्रयत्न केले नाहीत असंही नाही. काँग्रेसच्या अध्यक्षपदाच्या निवडणुकीसाठी शरद पवारांनी दिल्लीत सगळी व्यूहरचना केली आणि ती व्यूहरचना संपत असताना शेवटच्या क्षणाला माघार घेतली. आणि ही माघार काँग्रेसच्या अध्यक्ष आणि सीताराम केसरी आले वगैरे झालं. ही शेवटची माघार ही पंतप्रधान पदासाठीची माघार होती हे लक्षात ठेवा. त्यानंतर सगळ्या ज्या महाराष्ट्रातल्या घडामोडी आहेत त्या प्रादेशिक पक्षाच्या पातळीवरच राहिल्या. आत्ता महाराष्ट्रातून देवेंद्र फडणवीस यांना दिल्लीत नेणार अशा अफवा भाजपच्या बाहेर सातत्यानं केल्या गेल्या आणि देवेंद्र फडणवीस दिल्लीत कसे येणार नाही याची व्यवस्था करण्यात आली. त्याच वेळेला नितीन गडकरी, मगाशी कोणीतरी गडकरींचा पण उल्लेख केला, नितीन गडकरी भारतीय जनता पक्षाचे राष्ट्रीय अध्यक्ष होते. त्यांना RSSचा 100% म्हणजे RSSच्या सांगण्यावरूनच ते भारतीय जनता पक्षाचे अध्यक्ष झाले असेल कदाचित. पण भारतीय जनता पक्षाचे अध्यक्ष असतानाही पंतप्रधान पदाच्या स्पर्धेत त्यांचं नाव चुकूनही येणार नाही याची संपूर्ण काळजी त्याही वेळेला घेतली गेली. ती आजतागायत घेण्यात आलेली आहे. त्यामुळे त्या स्पर्धेत महाराष्ट्रातला म्हणजे महाराष्ट्राचा DNAचाच प्रश्न आहे आणि हा प्रश्न महाराष्ट्रात सोडवू शकेल. तो महाराष्ट्राला ते वरचे लोक दक्षिणेतले समजतात आणि खालची 4ही राज्य आपल्याला उत्तरेतले समजतात. आपण कायम ना गरका ना घटका असतो.
I think I will begin with your question because I don't know what exactly is the miscommunication between us. What I meant to say or what I said actually was that BJP got 240 seats, and if, as many were expecting, they had done rather badly in Bihar, or if they had not done so well in Odisha, they could have easily slipped to 220. That's one that I said. Related to that, then I said, and that is an unimportant part of what I really spoke about, is that in case BJP had slipped to 220 and something below that, then this entire calculation of 280 would have been difficult for the BJP and then probably would have been in a different zone of political discussion altogether in terms of government formation. That's the only limited point I made. Besides that, I don't have much interest in a sense in projecting what would have happened if BJP had gone down to 220. It would have been even more chaotic situation than we are currently. I will also similarly answer your simple question on course correction, sir. Yes, any government does course correction. There is nothing so extraordinary about doing that. What is extraordinary now at this moment is, however, the BJP being forced to do that course correction, because this government was never known for doing that and admitting that, okay, there might have been some mistake here or there and tweaking it, the policy tweaking. But in spite of such course corrections, the larger scenario in which the BJP operates would remain the same. That won't change, because that course correction would mean that the BJP ceases to be BJP. That is unlikely to happen. So I am not really worried about, and I'm not even excited about the smaller things. In the economy, smaller things would change, of course, in terms of relief for unemployed people, in terms of relief for agrarian distress. And Agnivir, of course, is one of the small things that might happen. But beyond that, are we in for any substantive change? I don't know, even in the economic policy sphere. I won't answer the questions on Gadkari and your question on Maharashtra Assembly. Let's not do crystal ball gazing. And B, Maharashtra is an entirely different subject at the moment. It is in for all sorts of chaotic combinations that are likely to happen in the state, so we don't know. The only thing about Maharashtra that I know is that BJP, but other parties also contributed to it, have completely torn asunder Maharashtra's social fabric. So whoever wins, I am least interested in that because of this extreme kind of animosity, Maratha versus OBC, Dalit versus Maratha, OBC versus Dalit, and so on and so forth, which is really something which is a long-term damage than party A coming to power or party B coming to power. And no party seems to have an answer to that. The more substantive question about thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, yes, it looks attractive if you put it that way. My trouble with that proposition would be that, was there a thesis for 70 years, as you said? I don't think that there was a thesis 70 years. The so-called Congress system started collapsing in the 1960s, late 1960s itself. And it imploded. Then Indira Gandhi did come to power with a thumping majority, but there was no similarity of the Indira Gandhi's rule of 1971-76 to the Nehruvian kind of Congress system that she sort of inherited and tried to capitalize upon. Then B, in 1980 when she comes back to power, she actually negates herself and does so many different things. And in the sense, therefore, politics being so dynamic, it would be a mistake to imagine that there was a neat continuity between 1947 and 2014. Then you also forget the rupture of 1989, which is in fact even more important than what Indira Gandhi did. If Indira Gandhi only destroyed the Congress party, 1989, in a sense, reopens the entire conversation about what India is about, what social justice is about, and what democracy is about. 1989 opens up that. And therefore, 2014, in a sense, should be seen in the light of 1989 rather than the obsession of looking at it from 1960 kind of standpoint. Therefore, I don't think there is this issue. The synthesis part, however, is interesting because democratic politics ultimately thrives on the basis of some minimal consensus. Otherwise, you don't have democracy. In India, funnily enough, or not so funnily, there seems to be a consensus, unsaid, unstated, not theorized consensus about the way in which the state should relate itself to the economy, or state-capital relation. That state-capital relation had a certain consensus between 1950 and 1970. Indira Gandhi sort of had to outgrow that consensus, but then later on, since 1980s, a new consensus started emerging, which then got known as the new economic policy of 1991. But it actually emerges in 1980s itself. That consensus is actually part of the synthesis that you are talking about today, namely the state-capital relationship. The other consensus, and therefore one could call it synthesis, is also through the chaotic relations of the Mandal parties and the non-Mandal parties of the 1990s, a consensus has emerged. And that consensus, I would put it cruelly, is to bypass questions of social justice by talking of social justice. That's the consensus we arrived at. The Indian elite and the Indian state arrived at a consensus in the 1990s that let us talk at the rooftops about social justice and don't do anything about social justice. That's the second consensus that has emerged. The third consensus, probably forced by the BJP perhaps, is not on the Hindutva question, but on the question of Hinduness. And I think today the Congress probably and many other opposition parties, including Mandal parties, have realized, but particularly the so-called secular left has realized, that there is much energy in the Indian tradition that needs to be drawn upon. I think that is part of the new consensus that is emerging. Hindutva would remain contentious, but the question of Indian tradition seems to have forced a new consensus, a new dawning that yes, there are things that we can draw from tradition. So these are the syntheses that have emerged, but I am not sure that they have emerged neatly in a kind of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, mainly because, after all, the Hegelian postulation doesn't replicate itself in real life in a neat fashion, and therefore you don't find antithesis as clearly as possible. But yes, we can continue the conversation.
Yeah. We had two questions in that corner. Yeah. And then the lady.
Good evening, sir. My name is Vikrant Patwardhan. I will ask less about opinions and some clear-cut technical options, because opinion questions would be more difficult to answer in this forum. Two questions. First one is, a recounting of number of Lok Sabha seats that are there is possible, possibly post 2026. What are the other possibilities excepting pure population-based counting of Lok Sabha seats? Because if it's pure population-based, that's just going to be extremely contentious, and you're going to see a north-south conflict emerging over there. That's one. A second question is about, I would like to know from the surveys that you had conducted nationwide. Now, in the lead up to the election, when I used to be in touch with my friends or other business colleagues, we hear that the economic environment at the ground level is not ebullient. It's not celebratory. But in whatever I heard from 5 or 6 states, it was never distressing. There was no joy, and there was no joy, however you pronounce it correctly, in the environment. But it was never so depressed and so distressing that you read about suicides or heard them in the local conversations. So anecdotally, factually, what is it that you saw or heard of where economic distress was widespread, but it was not bubbling up to the surface in terms of political conversations? These are two very distinct questions, if you can take them both in whichever order. Thank you.
Thank you. The lady in the last, second last row there. Please keep your questions short and pointed.
Hello, sir. Yes, sir. So you were saying the Hindutva policy of the BJP has a major impact on his histories. So I am from Kerala, so I have an opinion on that. The recent visit of Modi to the Kerala has a dramatic event happened there. So if you say that like Hindutva can change the Kerala policy also, but it is actually not going to change it. So the thing is, the Modi has had a visit with the non-Catholic Orthodox communities recently. So these visits shows that these communities are going to have an alliance with the Modi government. So it is different. So the political dynamics which is going to happen in Kerala will be different. So it is not the ideology of the Hindutva is not going to happen in Kerala. So I want to ask you that if we change the mode of conduct of election commission, can we recover India as a secular state, or can we see the future of India which is alliance with the preamble of the constitution? So this is my question, sir.
Yeah, one question from here, Mr. Anand Dagashi, and then the gentleman behind.
Is it really possible to talk about BJP and BJP's politics without mentioning RSS role? Because as we know, that's the alma mater. That's the parent organization of BJP. RSS has its own agenda, which does not really restrict itself to any particular election, as we know. So when one is talking about the 2024 election results and what is likely to happen over the next 5 years, etc., how do you look at the RSS long-term view? And when I say RSS long-term view, I mean over the next 20-25 years minimum, because that is the way I think they function. So my question is it really possible for BJP to distance itself from RSS to make itself an umbrella party, pan-India umbrella party in the true sense, like the way Congress was at one point in time? And if that is not possible, then what are the options that are left before RSS, not BJP, to make its presence felt across India?
So I read in a lot of newspapers and the YouTube and all, that a lot of the intelligent people, they are saying that, oh, Modi has formed the government or India has formed government, but they don't have the mandate. And they just give all sorts of words. Oh, it is a personal loss, it is a moral loss, it is a political loss, it's just a numbers win, but everything other adjectives they have lost. So the intelligent people pushing this type of thought process, do you think it is a dangerous for democracy? Because a common person, like, he starts thinking like it is a stolen election. You know, like they said in America that it is a stolen election. They tried to push that view. Like a lot of like you mentioned Mr. Yogendra Yadav, so even he has said that, oh, it is like the mandate is not with them, but they just have the numbers and so they are forming the government. So is that a dangerous view to push?
I will take this set of questions. You know, a quick clarification. I don't think I mentioned Yogendra Yadav at all. I have worked with him, yes. I am in touch with him, yes. but now he is an active political player, and therefore in my analysis I haven't quoted him, I don't think so. But anyway, that's a small clarification. I will begin with this question anyway, since I am responding to you. Mandate is probably an overused and exaggerated word. Very few elections actually give mandate. Otherwise, an election is a mechanism through which a majority party comes to power. And to that extent, Modi coming to power and the NDA forming a government is only a natural consequence of the electoral outcome this time around. If, on the other hand, TDP and JDU had sort of declined to join this government and joined the India bloc, and they would have formed the government, I would still not have called it anything morally wrong. Just as I never said that formation of Uddhav Thackeray government in Maharashtra was not morally wrong, because moral questions of the individual level are different from moral questions of political morality in a democracy. Why are then people talking of moral loss? I can understand why they are talking about that. As I mentioned in my speech also, if you first lift up a certain icon to a pedestal and say that this is extraordinary, put a certain bar on that, then any small flip, any small slip can look as a loss. And that is what happens when you start by saying Modi ki guarantee, and then Modi doesn't deliver in elections, so it becomes a moral loss. This discussion of moral loss in the public domain therefore means only this, that Modi is now a political leader with a majority, full stop. Nothing beyond that. In 2014 and 2019, there was something more than that. That there was an excitement, and that excitement has lost its steam. In intellectual discussions and public fora, such rhetoric is inevitable in the context of the shrillness that any democracy automatically has. By nature, it has. The moment Trump arises, the entire texture of public discourse in the United States becomes shrill. So, in the sense, if X is shrill, then that shrillness is a response to the shrillness that precedes and posits itself in the first place. That is what has happened in India, that public discourse has become so shrill because of what has been said and done in the last 10 years. Beyond that, we shouldn't take it much seriously. But if your question is, does it contaminate the public mind? Well, in these days and times, anything one does and says suddenly reaches the public. And therefore, there is this explosion of opinions, information, views, everything. And therefore, it's a larger question for democracy to tackle with. Contamination is always a curse that democracy has to live with. There is a contamination in the UK election that will happen next month. There is a contamination, as you yourself pointed out, in the US context. Similarly, in India also, there is a contamination of various kinds, right from Indira Gandhi's times through the 1990s and today. On 2026, the most serious question that Indian public discourse sort of tries to avoid. That is how I would put it. Because that delimitation, which is now likely to happen or supposed to happen, might have to take into consideration the demographic imbalance between the different states and among the different states of India. The debate goes this way. A, democratically, and therefore in terms of representation theory, the more populous states having more representation is not wrong, and therefore North should have more seats than it has today. B, the argument is that India is not merely a representative democracy, but as I mentioned, is also a certain kind of social contract that we entered in 1947, namely that we will live together as different groups, communities, states, union of states, therefore. Given that kind of social contract, it is obligatory on us democratically to weigh the principle of representation with the principle of internal balance, coexistence, more theoretically called as federalism. This debate has never been even entered into in India. Nobody goes into that debate. But ironically, politics has this self-correcting mechanism. And my suspicion is that now the BJP, being dependent on TDP on the one hand and eager to enter the South, will downplay the importance of delimitation, which otherwise one would have said, oh no, democratically we must have delimitation, etc., etc. Having lost seats in UP, the BJP would be more cagey about roughshod going on the democratic principle of representation alone, a more consensus-based approach on how to go about maybe giving weightages to different states and ensuring their role, or strengthening the role of Rajya Sabha, or simply making an amendment to the constitution that this delimitation will not change the existing composition and weightages of the states, but only do internal delimitation, as we have done earlier. My sense is that the third option is most likely, that a consensus among all parties. Remember, politics are clumsy, and therefore they might not go into theoretical discussions of representation versus federalism, but they might simply realize instinctively the problems in either of the two, and therefore postpone the issue. And postponing the issue is probably one of the beauties of democracy, so they might do it. On economic distress, as I myself said, there was no anger. And therefore, yes, there is something very interesting happening. A hope, a possibility of betterment, and therefore no anger. I don't have the numbers right now, but they are now on the website of the Lokniti, so you can check those numbers. There were two other questions. One was, in your individual life, in last 5 years, has your economic condition been better off, the same, or worse? And you will find that the answers are fairly balanced. They are not all saying worse. Saying worse would have meant that there should have been anger. But there is a division: better, same, worse, and very bad. The other question was, has development been for all or only for the rich? And again on this question, despite all the rhetoric of crony capitalism and despite this distress, unemployment, etc., there was ambivalence. People didn't simply say it is only for the rich. Many said it is also for all. Finally, therefore, then, the only open question which we had was, what do you think is the most important issue while voting in this election? And there, almost 60% people, if you combine the answers of unemployment, mehengai, inflation, and poverty, if you include these three, 60% give these three answers. And this was an open-ended question. There was no menu given of answers to the respondents. So that's where we stand today. As far as the economy is concerned, for a variety of reasons, and we need not go into those, there was no anger, but an unease, disappointment that reflects in the elections. Kerala. On ECI secularism, the answer is simple, that poor ECI doesn't have anything to do with secularism. The job of the ECI is to conduct elections well. It has been conducting elections quite all right, but gets into lots of trouble also. We need not go into those issues. But Kerala Hindutva is an interesting question. I will give the answer in an indirect manner. As Hindutva becomes a pan-Indian phenomenon gradually, earlier you said, critics said, it's only the Shetji Bhatji. No, it didn't remain that. Then they said it is only traders and urban people. No, it didn't remain that. So gradually Hindutva spreads. But as Hindutva spreads to Assam and to Kerala, there suddenly emerge multiple rhetorics of Hindutva which are apart from each other. So in Assam, Hindutva picks up local deities and combines them with the pan-Indian newly discovered deity called Ram. when it enters Kerala, it underplays the entire question of cow and beef, but tactically makes friends with the Christian Orthodox Church, because the Christian Orthodox Church is extremely suspicious of Muslims of Kerala. So it plays on that sort of fault line in Kerala. And as I mentioned in the speech, Shri Narayan Guru. Appropriating Narayan Guru, Basava in Karnataka, are typically exercises in both expanding the idea of Hindutva and also nuanced manner creating new Hindutvas for local variants. It's both. It's like, if you are selling a commodity in United States, you sort of pitch it at a different level and say that these ingredients are not there. If you pitch it in South Asia or Asia, East Asia, you emphasize the spice part of it, that it is spicy. So the same commodity which is sold in the United States as sober and non-spicy is sold in East Asia as spicy. That same marketing strategy would happen in the case of the expansion and creating more attraction for Hindutva. I guess I will stop here.
Yes, thank you very much, sir.
Sorry. Important question. It requires an entirely different kind of discussion on the BJP-RSS relationship. My quick answer would be that in many respects, the BJP does many things which the RSS might not agree with. So a compromise is arrived at. The compromise is, and I'm saying this as my assessment, I don't have any evidence and I don't think there is any proof for it. The compromise is that in terms of cultural assertion of the Hindu community's identity questions and related questions, the current government will give a free play to various Hindutva organizations, might do some things as a government also, but otherwise just ignore the entire rhetoric on love jihad and this and that. So in the cultural field, there would be an assault of this kind of rhetoric. But you as RSS don't interfere in economic questions. You as RSS don't interfere in questions of how we deal with judiciary, this, with that, Manipur. In private, I will not be surprised if the BJP government tells RSS that Manipur is a state question, let us handle it, you don't interfere in it. That would be BJP's answer. I think that understanding is there. Let's not go by their public rhetorics. On the other hand, yes, current BJP is partly or very substantially taken over by RSS way of thinking. And therefore, there is a better match between the two. Compare it with Bajpayee's times. And Abhishek Chaudhary, in his first part of Bajpayee's biography, actually tells this. How Bajpayee, in a sense, both temperamentally and politically was apart from RSS, though part of RSS. That duality slowly becomes more loose and RSS thinking becomes more predominant in the BJP. So there is a very complicated relationship between the RSS and the BJP. For the RSS, the goalposts would be entirely different, as even Mukund Sangoram pointed out. For BJP, obviously, as a political party, the immediate goalposts would be 2029. Before that, assembly elections. And therefore, before that, Maharashtra assembly elections. As a political party, you operate differently, although you have this kind of certain understanding and symbiotic relationship with the RSS. But it's a big subject, many people have dealt with it, and I'm not sure I'm really fully competent on the relationship between BJP and RSS at the internal level. I don't know those internal gossips adequately.
Thank you very much, sir. I regret we won't have time for more questions. Those of you who have questions may please take them offline. I will now request my colleague, Dr. Koina Lahiri, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. First, I would request our director, Abhay Vaidya, to felicitate our guests with PIC publications. So Today I came here wanting to claim that this presentation today would clear all my doubts about Indian politics, but I'm going to leave this ceremony with even more questions that I came in with. On that note, questions are good for the intellectual mind, so I celebrate that. So a very good evening to all. On behalf of Pune International Center, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all of you for gracing us with your presence and making this occasion truly memorable. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Palshikar and Mr. Sangoram for accepting our invitation and conducting such an insightful and thought-provoking discussion on 2024 Lok Sabha elections and its political implications. Your discerning knowledge on the matter has made us better informed about the nuances and complexities of electoral politics and the health of our democracy. I would also like to sincerely thank all our distinguished guests and attendees. Your enthusiasm and engagement added the necessary rigor to the discussion. Last but certainly not least, my heartfelt thanks to Ms. Geeta Hoswane and her team who worked behind the scenes to ensure the smooth execution of this event. Further, I would also like to invite you all to another event that we are organizing on the 15th of this month, that is this Saturday. It is going to be a lecture on science and music to be delivered by Pandit Arun Dravid. It's going to happen in the same venue and it will begin at 5 p.m. So please do attend that as well. And please follow PIC's social media handles. We keep it lively there and you can engage in conversations with us there. I'll conclude my remarks on the note that I hope whichever government comes to power, we are able to build a resilient democracy for the present and the future. Thank you.